It is Friday, October 7th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, we got a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. PS4 firmware 4.01 is available right now, and yes, it's software stability. Okay, that's really exciting. No, it's not. Next news story. If you remember last month, we had that little debacle with Sony and Bethesda, where Bethesda said, oh, it's kind of Sony's fault that they're not allowing mods on PlayStation 4 for Fallout 4 and the Skyrim remaster coming out soon. That has finally been resolved. Bethesda stepped forward and said that mod support is in fact coming to Fallout 4 and Skyrim, the Skyrim remaster, and they also announced that they're supporting both of these games on PlayStation 4 Pro. So not only will Fallout 4 be receiving a patch to make the game look prettier on PS4 Pro, but Skyrim Remaster is also going to be on PS4 Pro, and it's going to be rendered in native 4K, which is pretty impressive actually. The caveat to all this though is that mods are coming to PlayStation 4 versions of the game now. But apparently external resources cannot be used within the mods, which of course would imply all the wacky fun stuff that we usually see within mods, which usually make mods really fun. So only resources that are actually resources and assets within the game can be used for mods on PS4. And I would assume that would be like the one. I would assume that if the original problem was Sony, then this was the original problem, is that Sony didn't want mods to work that way, or at the very least, like I said, like at that time it was like probably a quality control thing. Maybe Sony had some sort of issue with quality control, and maybe that falls in line with what Sony didn't necessarily want to allow, which kind of sucks, because that's like, again, like the big thing about mods is all the really dumb stupid stuff that we can do with games when we have mods. But so that is the reality of the situation. All right, that is it for non-PlayStation VR news stories. So let's talk about PlayStation VR now. It's coming out next week, October 13th. Very exciting stuff. And if you have not noticed, review embargoes are over for PlayStation VR. So all publications, anybody that has received a PlayStation VR in advance can now actually talk about their feelings about it. They can review it. Tons of reviews are going up online. So the general consensus, it seems, is that PlayStation VR is actually pretty awesome. People are actually liking it a lot. Obviously, it has a great price to performance ratio, I think, is the big thing that's going for it. The number one thing that I'm hearing from everybody is that comfortability is like spot on. It's like pretty much leading the in terms of comfortability. Compared to all other VR headsets, PlayStation VR has great weight distribution, and it feels perfect and very comfortable to hold on your head for an extended period of time. And obviously, because PS4 doesn't have nearly as much performance as a high-end PC, that's always like a big concern. The screen resolution isn't necessarily as big, but of course Sony has built PlayStation VR in a way with the projection of the screen to actually make it very, like, the games to make the game still very pretty looking. To make to make it appear not as jaggy, although that's still kind of an issue for some people. In terms of the games that are getting reviewed, it seems like most of them are good to like bad. There's no like super like insanely excellent title that's getting reviewed out there. Some of the standouts are like Tumble VR is getting great reviews. Batman VR looks pretty cool. I hear the Harmonix game is actually pretty terrible. But what we'll do right now is we'll actually talk about, I'll read off every single launch title. So this is every single PlayStation VR game that you can get day one. 100-Foot Robot Golf, Batman Arkham VR, Battlezone, Carnival Games, Drive Club VR, Eve Valkyrie, Hatsune Miku, Harmonix Music VR, Headmaster, Here They Lie, Job Simulator, Loading Human, The Playroom VR, PlayStation VR Worlds, Res Infinite, Riggs Mechanized Combat League, Sports Bar VR, Super Hypercube, Super Stardust Ultra VR, Trackmania Turbo, Thumper, Tumble VR, Until Dawn Rush of Blood, War Thunder, Wayward Sky, Within, and World War Tunes. Never even heard of that one. You have to look that one up. Yeah, that's everything that's gonna be on. That's actually a lot of games. Like that. Like this is like what Sony's been preaching for a while. This is what like a lot of the media has been trying to tell people, which like because people don't seem to understand. They keep looking at this as a peripheral. This is like a full-on platform launch, and that's what every person in the industry has been kind of preaching about VR, is that it's a pretty substantial change. It does mean a lot. It is something that is actually going to have a very large place in the gaming industry. It actually has some heavy weight to it for people that still like don't give a shit about it. I don't know how. You're crazy. It's fine if you don't have any interest, but to deny this being a very important and compelling feature to compelling like medium to games is beyond me. How you could think that it's not important, but this is definitely a real thing that's going to be happening very soon. But anyway, going into some more detailed news stories about PlayStation VR. So the PSVR AIM like Move controller, which basically looks like a bunch of PVC pipes, which is fine, I guess, because you're not going to be looking at it. You're going to be in a virtual space. But that peripheral is actually going to be, Shawn Layden has actually confirmed that that peripheral has more titles being developed for it, because initially we were only told that peripheral was just for the one game, Farpoint. So he's saying there's actually going to be more games for that, which goes into our next news story, which is that PlayStation VR is not going to have just games compatibility, but it is going to be obviously going to have wider use for non-gaming experiences. Shawn was very keen on saying that no first-party studios are working on anything like that. He said, well, you know, us at Sony Interactive Entertainment, we make games, but other branches of Sony actually, you know, they're in talks with them about stuff like that, you know, TV experiences, movie experiences. Who knows what they're actually trying to formulate there, but there is, you know, talks going on about non-gaming applications for PlayStation VR, which we kind of already knew for a long time now. We already knew for like Oculus and Vive and, you know, all the other virtual reality solutions that are available on the market right now, that Sony's also basically in the same situation. It's funny, he actually said that he also took PlayStation VR to Hollywood and had a few notable people within the industry to try PlayStation VR for the first time, and I guess a few people within Hollywood said, this completely changes, like, this completely destroys narrative storytelling, and they basically posed the question of, like, they were like asking, like, how do we make this so we force people into a linear conversation, or make people look at like a certain situation, like we lose control of like the movie narrative more or less, which is funny because like that's not a problem for movies. It's one static experience where you stare at the screen and that's what you're being given. Video games are interactive experiences. Obviously virtual reality is an interactive experience, and the Hollywood guys are like, how the hell do we work with this? And it's I find it funny because it's like, well, the video game industry's been doing that since day one. So but that is like one thing you can look forward to, which I don't necessarily think you'd get like non-gaming experiences anytime soon, certainly, but it's in the pipeline. And now let's talk about something very important that Shawn Layden discussed about PlayStation VR, which I think we all kind of already knew, but certainly Sony reiterating their stance on this, and more importantly kind of telling us something that we maybe didn't necessarily see in the beginning, which is that PlayStation VR, he said, more or less is a very long journey, and we're constantly iterating our hardware. So let me share some quotes with you that Shawn Layden had to say. We are constantly iterating and innovating our hardware almost the minute that we delivered the first. When you deliver Unit A, you know A prime is already in design. You can look at the first generation of the product and see the future about where you want to go. There are certain technologies that we need to incorporate, certain technologies that don't exist yet. He went on to say that PlayStation VR is step one in a very long journey, and we're all in. We put all of it on the table, and I like our chances. Alright, so this tells us a few things. Number one being that when he's talking about Unit A and then A prime, I think he's kind of like saying, well, at some point, yeah, PlayStation VR will get revised in some way. And not necessarily in terms of, well, maybe it would be actual hardware improvements, but I would assume it would be more of a cosmetic thing, just like Sony has been doing for the longest time with PlayStation hardware, which is just slimming it down. Obviously, PlayStation VR is actually a pretty bulky piece of kit. Definitely looks like a first-generation device. Rightfully so, PlayStation VR is part of virtual reality, and virtual reality is kind of a first-generation outlook from every single manufacturer. Of course, VR has been around for a very long time, but as we always say, this is kind of the first really big, major, compelling push for VR in a very long time. Like, this actually works and it starts to make sense now. So these are very Gen 1 devices. They're very thick, bulky. I would assume that in, given 2-3 years time, PlayStation VR will just get slimmed down like every other piece of PlayStation hardware and be smaller, better form factor, even more comfortable to use, because I guess they kind of really nailed that the first go, but you see what I'm saying. Number two, this tells us that Sony is very, very, very committed to VR. We already knew this, but it's part of that long-term thing that we were talking about, and this even goes in line with the fact of what Sony's doing with PS4 Pro, and it possibly helps with the fact that, going back to the PS4 Pro thing, very consumer-friendly approach where it's like, you don't have to buy the next PlayStation, you won't have to buy the next PlayStation VR, but you will know that they will be compatible moving forward. At a certain point, you would get obviously cut off to where game compatibility wouldn't work because technology is moving so rapidly, but it would obviously be a pretty big spread of years until you're finally cut off from that compatibility list. So say given 5-6 years, who knows how long it would be, but it would certainly be a pretty significant length where you would have to upgrade your hardware at some point, but you don't have to buy the refreshes in between. Refreshes being whatever Sony does with another PSVR or the PS4 Pro, which we've said time and time again, you don't have to buy it right now. It's still a regular PlayStation 4, just slightly enhanced. But it's, they're using the same architecture, they're using the same platform, the same foundation, and anytime they will do another PlayStation from here on out, presumably, of course, because they haven't actually said this as a matter of fact, but basing it off of what Sony's been doing with PlayStation 4 Pro and how it's fully compatible, you'd have the idea where it's like moving forward, VR, PS4, or whatever Sony decides to, name these things moving forward, they will work. And number 3, he's very confident when he's saying, I like our chances about how we put everything on the table for this one device. And that makes a lot of sense, because obviously doing R&D for something like this takes a lot of money. They definitely put a lot into making this a reality. No pun intended. They are very confident going into this, and it's like I was saying, like, I don't get how some people still don't really care about this, or at the very least, are saying it's a gimmick or it's just a fad and this will go away or this and that. Like, this is actually a very solid piece of equipment. This is actually a very solid experience moving forward for games. It's not dramatically changing anything. You're still sitting in a chair more or less. You're still holding a controller. It's still a very comfortable, familiar feeling. It's just like you're just being put in a virtual space and taking it to an entirely different level, which doesn't have that. We had this conversation a million times. It doesn't have that lameness to it, I guess you could say, more or less. You know what I mean? The Nintendo Wii, it lost its novelty at a certain point. Games just stopped using the Wiimote at a certain point and just started using regular controllers. You know what I'm saying? Same with PlayStation Move. Same with cameras on consoles. When Sony did the PS2 Eye toy, did it again with PlayStation Eye. Microsoft did it with the Kinect. They really tried to push Kinect on Xbox One. Those experiences are completely, tacked on to the core gaming experience. This is part of the core gaming experience when you put on a headset and you're still in a game. Sony gets that. I think a lot of people do. Some people still don't. But it will just be a matter of time, I guess. Which, that's the thing. I mean, so when talking about sales numbers, how's PlayStation VR going to do? It's probably still going to, it's funny, a lot of analysts are saying, it's actually going to do fairly well. Sell upwards of, 2.5 million units, by the end of the year. Which I think would be, obviously, great numbers for Sony. It's hard to judge this thing, obviously, because it's not... It's a first-gen device. It's completely new. We don't really have anything to base off of other than the fact that Oculus and Vive just came out this year as well, but they're also very expensive. That's for kind of a different audience, and so it's hard to compare it to those numbers too, but I'm sure whatever Sony does, they'd be happy with. It's just really it's the long-term game, and that's what we'll really start to see moving forward. Anyway, those are just some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. So, obviously, like I said, no new videos for the last week, which I hated the fact that it happened. I actually made a pretty fast recovery, which is shocking. I thought for sure I was actually going to get worse from last week. Took a bunch of medicine, toughed it out, got a lot better. That's good. I'm still not 100%, by the way, but I keep burping because I drank a bottle of Coke before this video, so excuse me. The poll, the new Twitter poll for the next Let's Play is up. The poll will end tomorrow, well, I guess tonight, basically, because I put it up now, or I put it up a few hours ago when it was still Thursday. So you've got until tonight around, I'd say 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the choices are Need for Speed Underground for PlayStation 2, odd choice, I know, Katamari Damacy for PlayStation 2, and Spyro the Dragon for PlayStation 1. I'm feeling very nostalgic, and I really want to play at least one of those 3 games. It's kind of what I was feeling. A few people actually submitted a few of those games, so I was just like, yeah, that's a really good idea. So those are your 3 choices. The poll is live right now. I believe Spyro's winning, and I feel like there's a good chance it'll probably take it. People fucking love Spyro, and I love Spyro too. The Need for Speed Underground one's interesting, because if that one would have won, I would have done it in a situation where I wouldn't pre-record the parts. I would do a part, and then you guys would actually build the car, because as you all know, in Need for Speed Underground, you can completely customize the car. It's that's one of the number one things everyone loved about that game. So I thought if we do that game, it'd be perfect, because I would let you guys build the car. I'd just do top comments or Twitter suggestions or whatever the fuck we do. I'd let you build it. I wouldn't even give a shit. So that would be fun if Need for Speed wins. But those are your 3 choices. Go to my Twitter at mysticryan.com, place your vote, and we will go back to a new Let's Play on Monday. It'll be a traditional Let's Play too, where it's just me, and you hear me bullshit for 30 minutes, literally straightforward, talking to you guys about all this, nonsense as I typically do. And so yes, October 13th is PlayStation VR Day. Obviously, as I've mentioned a million times now, I will be picking up a unit. I'm getting it delivered, so because that was the only way I could really safely secure a unit. I don't have a pre-order in retail or anything like that. I can't do in-store pickup, so it'll probably get to my house a little bit later. So I probably won't have a video up right in the beginning of the day. So it'll probably be later, and really the only video I could probably do is just an unboxing, so I wouldn't get too excited to see anything or even first impressions. Yeah, I need to spend time with it. So, but what I'm planning to do is actually obviously the unboxing video, maybe a close-up video, obviously a first impressions video, and probably one video, but it would be multiple reviews of a bunch of games that I tried out, and I give you my opinion on it and my overall thoughts about it, and at some point I'd like to do a final review of it as well. So stay tuned for all that awesome noise this coming week. And then obviously Friday, which is Let's Talk PlayStation, which will be back here in this very same location playing PlayStation again. Oh, also, I almost forgot. I just looked at it. I glanced over in my peripheral vision and saw it right there. I was also, if you follow me on Twitter, you know this happened already. My original launch PlayStation 3, only 400,000 sent to North America, is dead. Which is funny because I was going to post the Twitter poll, and then I was like, I should probably fire up the old PS3 just to make sure it works, because I would want to record a PS2 game via HDMI on this guy. And so I plugged it in, and it wasn't working. I was like, oh no. So then I spent the next several hours doing everything I could to try to get it to try to bring it back to life, to no avail. It's done. It's not the yellow light of death, by the way. I think I've isolated it down to it's both software and an HDMI issue. It's really odd. Trust me, I've done literally everything I could. I'm like a PlayStation doctor. I've tried everything. It's not working. Which I would assume it's still obviously eligible for repairs if Sony even repairs these models anymore. I actually don't know that. So it's not like it's dead, but as far as anything I can do, it's pretty much a goner, which sucks. That thing is almost 10 years old now, which is insane. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.